Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. We are nearly finished a king size quilt. I only have the binding left to go and in the nick of time because I'm heading off to Mildura, our hometown of 18 years for Easter. So that's next weekend and I'm going to be gifting this to my friend down there. So really this is my last weekend to get this finished. So because I have limited time, I am going to try something new, step outside my comfort zone and do a binding that is completely done on the sewing machine. Usually for my quilts, I attach my binding to the front, I wrap around and I hand sew the binding to the back so you don't see any stitches. I do that for all of my quilts, and then today I thought I'm going to do it. I'm going to do the whole thing on machine. So I'm going to attach my binding to the back first and then wrap it around and stitch along the edge of the binding along the front, on the front. So you will see that stitch line, but I'm going to try and be as neat as possible and it will be much faster. Because it is such a large quilt, I just don't think I have the time to do the hand sewing. I've gone ahead and made my binding. It is the same fabric as the back of my quilt, okay, which is this sandy color and this beautiful sort of dotted circle pattern. So I have cut my strips. Again, doing something a little bit different. I usually do a 2.5 inch strip, but because I'm wrapping around and doing the stitch line, I gave myself an extra quarter. So I've done it 2 3/4 wide, and then I connected them all together with a diagonal seam to reduce bulk, and then folded them over lengthways and ironed them. So that's my binding, but before I get started I need to trim up this quilt right to the edge of my quilt because I still have the backing and the batting overhanging. And I'm going to be doing that with rotary cutter and my ruler, and I'm going to make sure I get really nice 90-degree angle on my corners so that my mitered corners of my binding is perfect. So let's do that and get started. So how much binding do you need? You need enough to go around the perimeter of your quilt, of course, plus about 2 rulers worth extra. So about 60 centimeters, or I think that's 2 feet, is it? Is an American ruler a foot long? 12 inches. So you're going to be leaving that ruler length unstitched and start stitching your binding in from there. I'm going to start on a straight edge. The raw edge of my binding is going to go against the raw edge of my quilt. I want to stitch that on with a 1/4 inch seam. I'm going to use some masking tape to put that on my quilt, my machine plate, where the 1/4 inch is, just so I can see it a lot easier and extend it down further. Why does that look teeny tiny? I might go a little bit extra. See if I like that better. But we are going to do a test. Sew about 10 centimeters and then stop, and we'll fold it over and just check that your binding covers your stitch line. So let's go with that. Needle down. So if I fold that over and onto the front, I can see it well and truly covers that stitch line. probably a bit too much. I might move my masking tape ever so slightly. So instead of 1/4 inch, I'm just going to go a little bit further along, just a few millimeters. Sorry to change from inches to millimeters, but I can handle 1/4 inch, but once I go smaller than that, my brain reverts to millimeters. I think I have, for the Aussies plain, that looks like then it is, if that's 10, it's about 7.5 millimeters. So let's try that. I don't have to unpick that stitch line because I'm making the seam bigger. If I was making the seam smaller, I'd have to unpick that line. Let's test that. So now when I fold that, and it will be stitched on the front, that covers that stitch line nice and comfortably, with enough room for if I go a tiny bit wonky, it'll all cover and it will look like a nice thickness. I'm happy with that. As I approach the corner, with my fingernail, I sort of line up where the bottom of the quilt, this edge of the quilt is. I need to stop stitching the same distance as my seam prior. So you could actually put a little dot with your pen there. I don't think I have a pen here. I'm just going to eyeball it. So I want to stop about, what does that was? 7 centimeters before that edge. Okay, so I'm usually not too bad with my eye. Okay, and then I'm going to stitch backwards and cut off. So as I filmed that, it got really blurry because the camera focused on my hands. So I'm just going to show you that again. Raw sides of my binding against the raw edge of my quilt. Walking foot on. Stitch length I have at 2.4. Stitch along up to your corner. Stopping that 1/4 inch away from the edge and doing a few back stitches. Binding goes up, making sure that it is in a straight line, and then down. Raw edge on raw edge. So the fold is flat against the top of my quilt and the raw edge, and here's my flat. So did you all see that? So I move the binding to the back, make a triangle, and then to the front. Start stitching that 1/4 inch in from the end. So the binding is now completely attached to the quilt except for this portion. Okay, so this is the start and the end of my binding. I'm going to show you how to attach it with a diagonal seam. First I need to take a tiny bit off this binding and then open it up. This is the width of our binding strip that we cut. And so I need to overlap this and this, so by this amount. So Make this nice because that's a bit, make that nice and straight. And lay that down nice and flat. And this one, nice and flat along the edge. We want to overlap it by this much. So I need to line up where, so for you to see, the end of this binding is sitting here. And if I straighten that out, I need to cut this top piece of binding right there. Okay, so that your overlap of the two binding pieces, it's a bit hard to see because it's all the same color. This piece and this piece are overlapped by the same width as what your binding was. So if you are using 2.5 inch strip binding, the overlap will be 2.5 inches. We pull this out, this bottom one, and just open it up with the pattern on the front, on the top, facing up. We take this one and we open that up and we put the pattern facing down in a perpendicular manner. I'm going to put 2 pins in this. So edge on edge, edge on edge, 1 pin here and the other pin here, because we want to sew a diagonal line from this corner to this corner. Stitch along this line with just a regular straight stitch. So a good trick to remember which way to sew is that you want to be cutting off a triangle. So your line goes this way as opposed to this way, because that wouldn't be cutting off a triangle. So sew this way and this piece will be cut off. I did that very badly. I'm just going to re-stitch the front because I was off. It was dragging off the machine, so it wasn't actually on the line when I started. That's okay. We all make mistakes. Try that again. That's better. Okay, pins out. I never cut anything until I open it up and just check. So this was our seam. When we fold it back, it should sit nice and straight and taut against your quilt, which it does. So I can go ahead and cut that off now. I'm happy with that, and I can finger press that seam open. And then I could just do my regular stitch along there. So it's all attached. I had some invisible threads in my collection which I never used. I thought this might be the chance to use them. So in the bobbin I have this one called The Bottom Line by Libby Lehman, and it is a cream colour and it's extra fine, but that's going to be showing up on this sandy colour, so that's good. And then I'm using on the top thread an invisible thread. It's 100% nylon, and it is called Wonder Invisible Nylon, invisible thread. And I did a test run on this scrap, and that all works well. So I'm going to be using that. You won't be able to see the stitch line on the front, and you will see the stitch line on the bottom, but it'll be this very fine cream colour. It's sort of looks skinnier than looks thinner than a regular thread. So I'm pulling the binding away from the bottom and out, because I'm going to be folding this over onto the front and running a stitch line ever so slightly in from the edge. Okay, obviously catching the binding, but very close to the edge and trying to be as neat as possible. And that thread on the back, that line on the thread, will sit off my binding just around the edge and it'll be hardly noticeable. So that is the plan. I've got my walking foot still. It's 2.5 inch, 2.5 length on my machine. As I go, I'm just going to be pulling that across and over and holding it with my fingers. There's nothing stopping you going to an iron and ironing that all out first, or maybe folding that all over and clipping it or pinning it, but I'm just going to do it with my fingers as I go. I'm just going to start on one side, and then I'll show you how to do the mitered corners. So needle down. Yes, this is good. This is much quicker. This is going to be much quicker than hand doing it. Exciting. You do step outside your comfort zone and learn new things is a good thing sometimes. Here we go. And just have a quick look. Oh, this is good. Yep. This is good. Happy with that. Very happy with that. Coming up to a corner, I'm just going to push the corner in with my finger, just get a little bit further along. Okay, so pull out from the bottom and roll that over. Sorry, my hand's in the way. Pull that from the bottom and roll that over is what I was saying. And then roll this one over to the side and just kind of maneuver with your fingers until you're happy you've got a nice mitered corner. Hold that in place or clip it. I'm just going to hold it with my finger, continue sewing up to that. Needle down, foot up, turn. And foot down, and then just continue on this side. Wow, game changer. Game changer. Very neat and looks good. Happy with that.
Oh my god! This one's taking you forever.
That's beautiful.
So beautiful. Yes, I don't want to get dirty. And oh my God. She went into my room and looked. Oh,
I know, I took photos.
how good they got my bed.
Aaron took the photos.
Thank you, Darren.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Oh, Rach, that's awesome.
You are amazing. That is so beautiful.
Absolutely.
So lucky.
That looks like it is. You have an original.
I know. I have an original Rachel.
Yeah.